For decades, aerospace engineers with the highest security clearances in the world have quietly retired, signed non-disclosure agreements thicker than legal briefs, and said almost nothing. They built careers inside programs that don't appear on any public record, worked on technology that never made it into a patent filing, and then disappeared into ordinary life: golf courses, suburban homes, grandchildren. Most of them stayed silent until the day they died, but a handful of them didn't. And what they describe, carefully, reluctantly, in interviews given late in life when they'd calculated they had less to lose, doesn't sound like the space program most of us learned about in school. It sounds like something else entirely, something that would require us to completely rethink where certain technologies came from, who developed them, and what's actually been flying in classified airspace for the last 70 years. This is not a fringe conversation anymore. The Senate has held hearings. Former intelligence officials have testified under oath, and the language coming out of Washington has shifted in ways that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. So the question worth sitting with, the one this testimony keeps circling back to, is whether the leap in aerospace capability the United States demonstrated in the mid-20th century was entirely homegrown, or whether it had help. Here's where the story gets complicated. If you look at the official timeline of American aerospace development, there's a strange acceleration that starts in the late 1940s and runs through the 1950s and 60s. The jump from propeller aircraft to jets is explainable. The jump from jets to certain classified platforms, craft that witnesses, radar operators, and military pilots have been describing ever since, is harder to account for using only the research that was published, funded, and acknowledged. Some of the capabilities reported don't follow a linear development path. They appear, almost fully formed, in accounts that keep surfacing from credible people with nothing obvious to gain. William Tompkins spent decades as an aerospace engineer and technical illustrator working inside programs he describes as existing entirely outside normal congressional oversight. His testimony, documented in detail before his death in 2017, claims that certain propulsion concepts being developed in classified facilities weren't derived from human research at all. Tompkins describes being a courier, carrying briefing packages between naval intelligence officers and leading aeronautical companies, packages that he says contained information gathered from sources that had no earthly origin. His account is specific. It includes names of programs, names of companies, names of individuals. It's the kind of specificity that's difficult to fabricate wholesale and difficult to verify completely, which is exactly the position most of this testimony puts us in. He's not alone in that specificity. Dr. Stephen Greer, founder of the Disclosure Project, has spent more than 30 years collecting testimony from military and government witnesses, people with verified service records, verified clearances, verified access to facilities and programs that officially don't exist. What emerges from that body of testimony, taken in aggregate, is a consistent picture. Multiple independent witnesses, never in contact with each other, describing similar technologies, similar propulsion principles, similar craft configurations, similar experiences of being told, explicitly, that what they saw was never to be discussed. Now, the technology itself, what witnesses and researchers actually describe, isn't magic. That's one of the things worth paying attention to. The principles they discuss, anti-gravity propulsion, electromagnetic field manipulation, inertia cancellation, are concepts that serious theoretical physicists have explored at the edges of mainstream research for decades. They're not impossible by any known law of physics. They're just extraordinarily expensive to develop and almost impossible to weaponize quickly enough to justify the cost through conventional military logic. Unless, of course, you didn't develop them from scratch. Unless the development curve was shortened considerably by working backward from something that already existed. Reverse engineering is the term that comes up again and again. Bob Lazar's account, whatever conclusions you draw about him personally, describes exactly that process. Working at a facility near the Nevada Test and Training Range, tasked with understanding propulsion systems on craft he was told were not manufactured on Earth. His description of the propulsion mechanism, a gravity wave amplifier operating on an element he called Element 115, was dismissed for years as science fiction. In 2003, Element 115 was officially synthesized and added to the periodic table. It's called Moscovium. That doesn't prove his account, but it does make the dismissal harder to sustain. And then there's the money. The black budget, the classified portion of U.S. defense spending, is not a conspiracy theory. It's a documented, publicly acknowledged financial reality. What's classified is what it's spent on. Researcher Catherine Austin Fitts and others who have examined the flow of federal funds have pointed to figures that are difficult to explain through any publicly known program. Trillions of dollars in unaccounted-for transactions, facilities that don't appear on official records, contractor relationships that exist in legal structures specifically designed to prevent oversight. The scale of concealment, if you follow the financial architecture, is not modest. It's the scale of something with extraordinary operational demands, multiple programs, multiple sites, sustained over generations. That kind of infrastructure doesn't get built to hide a drone. What makes this moment different from every previous moment in this conversation's history is that the denial has become more careful. The language from official sources has shifted from flat dismissal to something more nuanced. We don't know what these objects are. We can't rule out non-human origin. These are not the words of an institution with nothing to hide. These are the words of an institution managing a disclosure it didn't choose, on a timeline it didn't control, trying to figure out how much to say and in what order. If the testimony holds, if even a significant portion of what these witnesses describe is accurate, then the UAP incidents that have filled the historical record for 7 decades look different. They're not just unexplained phenomena arriving from somewhere else. Some of them may be human-operated craft, built using a technological foundation that was never supposed to be public knowledge. And some of them may still be exactly what they appear to be, craft that don't originate here, whose capabilities we've been trying to understand and replicate ever since the first ones came down. The disclosure movement has always been framed as being about one question: are we alone? But that's actually the simpler question. The harder question, the one that keeps the people who know something up at night, is what happens the morning after we're no longer alone officially. Because that morning doesn't just change our understanding of the cosmos. It changes the energy industry. It changes propulsion. It changes the entire economic logic of fossil fuels and the power structures built on top of them. It changes who controls the most transformative technology in human history. And it forces an accounting for 70-plus years of decisions made in secret by people who decided the rest of us weren't ready. Whether they were right about that is a different conversation. What's harder to argue at this point is that nothing happened. The witnesses are too numerous, the documentation is too specific, the financial architecture is too elaborate, and the technology gap, that unexplained acceleration and capability that started in the late 1940s, still doesn't have a satisfying official answer. The question was never really whether this technology exists. It's whether the people sitting on it will ever decide the rest of us deserve to catch up, and what it's going to take to make sure they don't get to make that decision alone.